I am a certified reciprocal alcohol and drug counselor. That's a CRADC. I am also a certified medication assisted recovery specialist, which is what's called a MARS. I am also a certified peer support. And I am also a CSS, a community support specialist. So I started off as a site coordinator, and that was an admission specialist when they would, when clients would come in trying to get into, needing to get into treatment. And so then I would do the pre-screening, and then I would do the admissions. And then now I do the assessments to determine their what's called ASI, Addiction Severity Index, and then the complete biopsychosocial assessment, and then assign the level of care, what we call level of care, that meets the criteria for the client's needs. So I had had a lot of treatment myself. I am in recovery. I have a sobriety date of January 14th, 2008. And I had been released from prison, was on parole, aftercare, really didn't have a whole lot of employable skills. And I happened to be sponsoring at 4 years sober a lady that was working on her licensure. And she had said that she had suggested that I apply for a site coordinator at Bridgeway Behavioral Health. And so that's what I did. And I was able to get an exception letter from all my felonies through Jeff City due to the length and the completion of all my sentences. And the nature of the crimes didn't interfere. And so that just started me on my way. I believed in having full participation and actively a member, good standing member in the Greater St. Louis of a 12-step program, and thought that I could be very helpful in this field. So fentanyl is what's considered an opioid opposed to an opiate. An opiate like heroin, morphine, things like that, they're what's called organic, right? They're grown, they're natural. Fentanyl is what we consider a synthetic, and that's why the name is changed from opiate to opioid, because it's grown, it's created in a lab. The potency, can be, starts off very, very high, and it's cheaper, easier to make, and because of the potency of a synthetic opioid, right?
Mm-hmm.
It comes in smaller packages, whereas a little dot of it, like you've seen, like the shape of a pen needle, could cause a fatal overdose to somebody that didn't have the tolerance level. And that's what's based on is like a tolerance level also. Heroin has a longer, what we call shelf life, that the effects of the heroin will last longer. And depending on the tolerance, though, and then the amount taken into the body is also a factor. Opioids, fentanyl has a shorter shelf life, is what we call. It means that so it's more of like an anesthesia than it is so much a pain thing. Than what opiates are for. So the effects are a little different, and it doesn't last long as they want. So they get that feeling, that escape, that sense of relief, right? And then it fades, and then they want more of it sooner. Another thing is that it's cheaper because it is synthetic, And because it's able to be transported a lot easier, as in smaller amounts. Whereas like if it was heroin, it would be a bigger package, or and stuff like that. So they come in pure, and it's smaller, and then it gets mixed. And it depends on like what they consider the cut and everything. So there is that feeling. It's an unnatural hit of the pleasure system that we have, right? The feel good.
Right.
Because it comes from the outside, it overstimulates it, and it creates like a euphoric experience that you could naturally experience yourself, even like, not to be funny, but like like an orgasm, right? Or something like that. That's something that's more natural. But when you take a substance that the body's not creating itself neurologically into the pleasure center, it's just kind of like that, wow, that hit all of a sudden. And then after you do it a few times, it creates what's called a euphoric recall, where you try to get that feeling again. And it's like nothing else can give you that intensity, right?
Right.
Because it did come from an external, unnatural, source that the body didn't make itself, if that makes sense. So they get it,
Absolutely.
right? And then it wears off, and then it almost seems like it's like somewhat of a depression or something like that. And creates, the body's like, whoa, that was good, let's do that again. Right? That felt good, let's do it again. And so it starts off psychologically, right? The disease of addiction is a biopsycho, or the treatment and like the recovery part requires a biopsychosocial. So it begins to center in the mind first, if that makes sense. And then what happens after that is the brain itself. The body's an amazing, right? It's just amazing. Is there's what's called like receptors, and we only have so many that's used to filling up, like in our pleasure system, from our natural, like endorphins and things like that, right?
Right.
So the body says, whoa, it doesn't know that this is coming from the outside, right? So the body creates more receptors to fill in that extra. So then what happens is when a person starts to like come down, or does it continue to put in those external ones, those receptors are empty, and it causes what we call withdrawal, right?
Right.
It's been withdrawn, there's empty here, there's the feeling, starts off not feeling well, psychologically, emotionally, and then the body starts reacting physically, because hey, we've got some receptors here, that are just sitting here, and eventually they will close. So that's what medicated assistant does. It's like, so I mean, like Suboxone and everything else, it has a longer shelf life, so it'll stay there longer, and then the naloxone kind of caps that receptor, so it stops, so that feeling, that neurological, because it's a brain disease.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's not empty. So then that's the goal of it, if that makes sense. So first they get this sense of this, what they call, since 1937, Dr. Silkworth, the leading pioneer in medical and addiction and alcoholism, right? And he discovered the phenomenon of craving. And that's what it sets in, that craving, where you're like, where crimes start getting committed, you start stealing from your parents, things like that. It's just the craving, it just becomes what he termed paramount over your values. You know, the things that's why people say, oh, what happened? She was such a good girl, or, you know, or a good boy, or they had everything going for them. And now look at them. So, yeah, so the overdoses, the overdoses is, so what you don't understand is, or so what needs to be understood is, originally the potency. So it depends. You get people that get a hold of it, and they have like, and there's certain what they call cuts, certain things that they put in it that's not the drug, to make it not as potent, right? And because a lot of them aren't like, because they're not chemists, they're it's not done in labs, it's done in the streets, that you'll get a dealer that has so much cut, right? And he'll cut the batch like, I don't know, like 90% or something. Then you'll get another dealer, or even the same dealer, that gets a batch, and maybe he doesn't have as much cut on him as he used to, or as he's had before, right?
Right.
So then you can't never gauge how strong the potency of the fentanyl. And so you get used to like one dealer where you do like 3 pills to get that effect. And then there's the tolerance level, right? Where it needs more with those receptors. And then you either go and cop from somebody else, you require it from somebody else that doesn't cut their fentanyl as much as this person does. But you're used to doing like 3 pills. So you do 3 pills, and actually the equivalency of the actual fentanyl is maybe like 10, right? So then there comes the overdose. You just can't never determine that. Another thing with the overdoses is some serious concerns, is what you'll see where like somebody does a lot of time, like they're institutionalized, or even in treatment, long-term treatment. You do 30 days long-term treatment, you get that Vivitrol that's cleaned out that receptors, and then you relapse. You know, you're more susceptible for a fatal overdose, like with 1 pill or half a pill, because that tolerance level has, you know, significantly decreased. And they don't because it's a brain disease and stuff like that, they don't say, like, nobody that cops from a drug dealer doesn't say, so what was the equivalency of the cut this week? You know what I mean? Or you know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
that's why, and it's cheaper because it's synthetic and it's all over the place. It's very cheaper. It's easier to smuggle in. It's easier to carry. And it's just so you know, undeterminable about the potency of what you're going to get every time you're going to. So one of the reasons that they would do that is because, once again, the stronger it is, right,
Right.
the more cut that they can add to it, producing more capsules, more pills, and more money to be made. So the stronger something is, always, and like the drug, you know, the drug world or whatever, the stronger that a dealer or distributor can get a hold of is like triples, you know, the how much money they make off of it. So yeah, let's throw some
So
carfentanil in there, because then now, instead of like for like a gram of that death, right, I can add 5 times more cut, and then produce, you know, 250 capsules, where before, you know, it would only cover 10, or people wouldn't come back and buy it because it was cut too bad, right?
right.
So that's the purpose of wanting more and more is because of how much more you can make off of it by the quantity that you can put out there.